axis stage, and then it went back to a 4-axis stage, and all these things are history. And when I was a student way back before most of you were born, and that's not a extraordinary statement, which is a fact, because I was a student with Professor Naidu, who is the one who originally wrote the book after Prof. That was 1951. 1951 was the time. I finished my intermediate class. Then I joined college in 1951 as a BSc Honors student at Presidency College, Madras. It used to be called Madras, now it's called Chennai. Madras is the one that I grew up in. They still use the word Madras University. They have not changed it to Chennai University yet. And that'll be the day when my goodness, what's happened? Anyway, that's when I was introduced to universal stage in 1954. 1954, the first time I joined as an MSc student with Professor Naidu, was the head of the department, just took over the geology department at Madras University, and he had several master's students and several PhD students. One of my old professors at Presidency College became his PhD student, and I became Naidu's master's student, and we all had our own projects. But the only instrument that we learned how to use was the universal stage, because before that, there was nothing. Everything was dependent upon the universal stage, and if you look at all the theses produced in those days, I'm talking about 1954, 55, 56, all the way up to early 60s, they were all done with the universal stage. Every thesis had so much information gathered using the universal stage and then making petrological conclusions, mineralogical conclusions leading into petrological conclusions. There are stories I can tell you, but then they can all wait. Between now and tomorrow evening, I'm sure there will be occasions for me to tell you stories from now and then, which is off the subject, but then that's good. We don't have to keep talking about the subject all the time. It gets boring after a while. You have to tell a joke, something like that. Make a story easier to understand. But then you might wonder what the universal stage looks like. What I did was I brought with me the stage that I used in New York. And as a matter of fact, the department owns it. I don't own it. And I requested the department, could you please loan it to me? I'll take it to India and then bring it back intact. You're going to take it to India? Yeah, I said, yes, all the way to India. Said, you're going to bring it back, I hope? I said, yes, sir. But then nobody is using it. I am the only one who knows how to use this thing. Nobody else knows. So, all right, it's okay. As long as you bring it back, yes, but then nobody is using it. But then we want it back. Yes, it will come back. So this machine has traveled all the way from New York, that's where I live, to the United States. And I'll have to take it back. Okay. The reason I brought it here is because to show you that this is the way, that there are many companies that manufacture the universal stage. Two main companies. One is Light's company, the other one is Bosch & Lomb, or Zeiss. No, Bosch & Lomb didn't come into the picture. That came in later. So Lights and
Zeiss.
Yeah. These are the only two companies that manufactured, and the one that we worked with and learned from is the Lights machine. So we are familiar with the Lights machine, and that's the one I have here. It comes in a nice, neat little box in those days. And the whole thing looks like this. I'll show it to you from a distance. I mean, for those of you who have not seen it, here it is. But those of you who have it, please take good care of it. And it will come in very handy. Next time you see it, say, this is the machine that I would like to learn how to use it. So it comes with a stage, like so. And this gets mounted on the research microscope. Not all microscopes can handle this. Only a research microscope can handle this because the distance between the eyepieces and the actual stage has to be minimum. to accommodate all these things. And then there are a number of axes that are present in this. To start with, there is the main axis that will rotate along with the microscope axis, all right? And then there is another axis which can rotate within itself, and there is a screw here that will let it rotate like so, all right? And then there are other axes that you can rotate. There's one more that you can make it tilt every which way you want, and then you can stop it. Then there's a screw that will allow it to rotate in other directions. You can see it moving this way, or you can move it the other way, and this one can rotate inside. So there are a number of different rotations you can go through. The whole idea is to take a thin section, which Dr. Krishnamurti was telling about. I'm sure you're all familiar with thin sections. Unfortunately, thin sections, looking through the microscope to identify minerals, is becoming a rarity later on. Nowadays, people don't even do that. To tell you a story, somebody asked me, "You're a geologist? You go to the mountains, you see a big mountain chain, and then you go there and you see an outcrop, and then you collect a rock, and then you bring it in, and then you make a thin section, and then you take one mineral out of it, and then you write a big long story about the origin of the mountain itself." I said, "Yes, we do that." But then he says, "How can this one little mineral inside a rock represent the whole mountain?" I said, that's the way geology is. I couldn't answer him at that time. I said, that's the way geology is. He said, "Oh, really? Okay, that's all." That was the end of the story. And then life continued. Anyway, the reason why I'm telling you all this is because nowadays, things don't happen this way. They go to a rock, they collect a sample. They don't even go there sometimes. They said, "Send somebody there to collect the rock and they will bring it." And then this fellow takes it and then makes a polished section, put it on the electron microscope or microprobe. Whatever is available. It used to be electron microprobe. And then the electron microscope also came before or after, it doesn't matter, but they all do the same thing anyway. So they just put it in, and then they push a button. Then they sit there, and after a while, something comes out on a piece of paper. He says, chemical analysis. Okay, and then he pushed this through another machine, and it tells you what mineral it is. That's the subject we are now dealing with. And at one time, it used to be a big deal. We bring a rock, we make a thin section, we put it on the microscope, and then we put it on the three-dimensional stage, and we do lots of things before we know exactly what we're talking about. Today, no, the answers are ready-made. The only thing is, they don't know what the answers are. They don't know whether it's a clinopyroxene or orthopyroxene, and they don't even know it's a pigeonite or any other thing, and say, "What's the chemical analysis?" "Oh, it's got low calcium, so it should be a low calcium pyroxene." Okay, low calcium pyroxene. There are different kinds of low calcium pyroxenes. Which one is it? "Oh yeah, look at the MgFe ratio." It prints out the MgFe ratio. And then there's a table that tells you what mineral it is according to the MgFe ratio. See, this is the way geology has become. And nobody looks at the microscope anymore. They all stare, not just look, stare at the electron microprobe and what it puts out. They don't even know what's happening inside. Somebody programmed it, somebody wrote the program for it, and then it just digests everything and then comes in here. Only the fellow who wrote the program knows what it is like. As a matter of fact, at one time, I have to digress here to tell you a story. I was working on moon rocks. This was way back when Apollo 11 was sent there, and then a friend of mine introduced me to a group who said, "Yeah, you can work." And in those days, electron microprobe was the big machine. And there are lots of changes that have happened in the electron microprobe also. Originally, it used to be three channels. Now we have 5 channels, and then they are automated, and everything. Previously we had to do 3 elements and 3 elements and 3 elements. We had to do 3 runs. If you understand the electron microscope, you had to use it 3 times on the same mineral at the same spot, and then combine all these things, and then it becomes a cumbersome thing. Now everything is so automated. You turn on a machine, then you come back tomorrow morning, it's got 200 analysis all printed out. And then you put it through another machine and it'll tell you all the answers. So, what did he do? All that he did was nothing. Just take the rock and then put it into the machine, and then comes all the answers. What's he going to do with all the answers? I don't know. He has to ask somebody, what should I interpret this? Or read some papers and then make some interpretation. Anyway, that's the way things have improved, even in the electron microprobe business. But then, this machine more or less stayed the same thing. With 4 axes, it became 5 axes, and we're back to the 4 axis now. The important thing is, how does this machine work? Dr. Krishnamurthy has already given you a general idea of how it works. Basically, the whole idea is to take the crystallography, which is A, B, C. You know what the A, B, C are. A equals B equals C will be the isometric system. And then there's the next system, tetragonal. You understand all of it. I don't have to go through mineralogy and also crystallography anymore. So tetragonal, hexagonal, orthorhombic, monoclinic, triclinic, and he showed you the progression of monoclinic to triclinic in the feldspar system. And basically what this machine is trying to do is to relate the ABC to the optical properties. And in optics, the way the light travels through the minerals, all right, we divide them into 2 groups, the uniaxial or the biaxial. You already alluded to it. I'm not saying anything new, I'm just rehashing what Dr. Krishnamurthy said. I'm sure all of you already know, but it's important to keep in mind that the ABC of crystallography is going to be related to the X, Y, and Z. I call it Z because I'm used to teaching American students. In America, the Z here is Z. So you'll forgive me if I keep saying Z. When I say Z is a Z. Okay? So the ABC and its relationship to the XYZ. This is the thing, which is known in optical mineralogy and in the universal language as optic orientation. Optic orientation is the key to mineral identification, and mineral identification is the key to petrologic description. Petrologic description and textural description combinedly will give you the petrogenesis. This is the order in which people have to make the progress in order to finally come to the petrogenesis. Petrogenesis is the final. And of course, petrogenesis in the global realm is plate tectonics. As a matter of fact, when I was studying BSc honors and MSc, there was no plate tectonics. Don't be surprised. I'm an old man. I'm not very proud of telling you I'm an old man, but I'm an old man. That's the reality of it. I'm 84 years old. I mean, you might think, this guy is 84, he's still standing and talking, he's still driving, he's still talking. Yeah. Yes, 84, yes, I'm still functional. I'm still functional. I travel and I do lecture and I still take classes. Not every day, but once a week I teach a class. But that's what makes me feel young, because my class is much younger than me and they give me the energy to keep young. Okay? Now back to the subject. Every once in a while I digress, all right? You raise your hand and say, come back to the subject. You have to remind me, you're going off the subject. Okay. Anyway, coming back to the subject, ABC is relation to XYZ, is the guts of the whole thing. If we can do that, without having to resort to any other techniques. We are finished with this business. That's what we do. As a matter of fact, I don't want to say anything too drastic, but there is not a single machine that can do this for you today. You talk to anybody who is an expert in mineralogy or petrology, particularly petrology. As a matter of fact, the petrologists today don't know any mineralogy. Pardon me for saying so, those of you who are petrologists. I mean, you're a different type. You're not the new petrologist. You're the old type petrologist who had to learn mineralogy and optical mineralogy and then only petrology. Nowadays in the American universities, they don't even teach an optical mineralogy course. Do you know that? You come to America, you say, I want to learn optical mineralogy. There's nobody who teaches it anymore. But take a mineralogy course, they'll teach you optical in a week or two. What do they teach you? They teach you put the microscope, to put the thin segment on the microscope and then rotate it around and see there's the extinction. You see this color change. You see this, you see that. There's the Michel-Levy chart. You can use the chart. Is this first order or second order? No, this is what they teach you. And then there are books, so you can refer to the books to get the answers. They teach you optical mineralogy in 1.5 or 2 weeks of classes. 2 weeks of classes is 3 hours and 3 hours, so 6 hours of teaching. You learn all optical mineralogy. I give them a namaste, thank you. No, I don't think I'm going to learn anything like this. Anyway, that's the story. Coming back to the main line, the ABC and XYZ, how do they relate to each other? There is not a single machine that can tell you this answer. Even an X-ray machine, it'll take you a long time to work out all these details. X-ray machines can tell you the relationship, but it takes time and it takes certain amount of knowing how to interpret the whole thing. But with this machine, with some simple knowledge of optical mineralogy and simple knowledge of crystallography, you can do that. And within a matter of maybe a half hour, an hour, you can do it all. Okay? So these are the kinds of things that I would like to make sure you people understand that can be done with the universal stage, that cannot be done with anything else. The 2E was mentioned as one of the items that was the one item that only this machine can measure and nothing else, which is still a fact. Many people will start with 2B and say that's the only thing that can be done, and I say no, I extend it. The relationship between ABC and XYZ, this machine can do in a short period of time and very well, which the others cannot do. And then of course finally we come to the last item that was mentioned in Dr. Krishnamurthy's lecture, which is the AN content of plagioclase feldspars. You all know that feldspars are a very important component of all rocks, igneous, sedimentary, metamorphic. They all contain feldspars. As a matter of fact, if you read any book in petrology or mineralogy or general geology, you should learn that feldspars are the most abundant rock-forming mineral on Earth. You take any earth rocks and then look at the composition, you'll find 70% or more of it is feldspar. And of course, there are feldspars in feldspars. There's potassium feldspar, there's autoclase, and then there are variations of the autoclase, etc., etc. And then there is the plagioclase feldspar series going from albite through labradorite to anorthite. Anorthite is very rare in nature on Earth, but very common on the moon. But luckily, I work in an area in South India. You must have heard of a place called Sittampundi. It's a well-known complex called Sittampundi Complex, and somebody did a PhD thesis in Princeton University in America I did a master's thesis in Madras on the same thing. I did not know that this gentleman was working for a PhD thesis in Princeton University under, who was the professor?
Buddington.
Yeah, Buddington. He was working under one of the famous professors, Buddington, in Princeton University. And when I joined Madras University to do a master's thesis, my professor suggested, yeah, do it on Sunday. I said, yes, sir. So in those days, and I'm sure even today to some extent, you go to your professor and say, sir, give me a project I'll work on. It's not the case in America. They come to you and tell you, this is the project I want to work on. You're going to guide me? So it's in reverse. So in those days, 54 rather, I came to Professor Naidu and he suggested, why don't you work on Chintamani? Yes, sir. And there's another friend of mine, M.N. Balasubramaniam, who is now retired as the chief of the Southern Circle in Geological Survey of India. We both were classmates in BSc Honours, and we both were classmates when we were doing master's thesis. And then he said, why don't you do the other part? The other part is Sankaridurg. Those of you who know the areas in Salem district in South India, Chittampandi is the southern part, Sankaridurg is the northern part. The southern part is the one that was being done in Princeton, which I didn't know at that time. And then the northern part, nobody cared about it. Professor Naidu already knew all this in his head, and he had an idea that he wanted to relate the southern part to the northern part and see that there is a certain relationship, and Tiruchengoor is a central massif which uplifted, and these two came around it. And then he was trying to prove in the long run, which we didn't know, this was his idea, that he didn't tell us. He said, you work on this and you work on this, and that's all. Yeah? So we didn't do anything, we went. Subramaniam helped me with my rock collection, and I went and helped him with his rock collection. And we both came back and we made our own thin sections, we made our own chemical analysis, we made our own, usage work, and we produced our thesis in 1955. We both got our master's degree. I'll continue this story for one more minute and then I'll come back to the usage. And we both were looking for jobs. M.N. Balasubramaniam and Nehru were both looking for jobs. And Geological Survey of India was the main unit. There was no Atomic Energy Commission in those days. Sorry to say that. There was no ONGC in those days. There was no NMDC. There was nothing else. There was not even an IBM. If you heard of IBM, Indian Bureau of Mines, there was not even an IBM. It was only GSI. So we wanted to become, part of GSI. That was the main thing. We even went through GSI training camp and all that. That's a different story. So we all applied for jobs. Geological assistant, 1955, 275 rupees salary per month. That was a big salary, geological assistant. We both went for the interview, and my friend got selected, and I was rejected. It was a good thing I was. In the long run, it turned out that because I was rejected, I had other opportunities. M.N. Balasubramaniam got selected. C.E. Nehru got rejected because he worked on Chittampandi, and the guy who was sitting in the interview board was the guy who worked in Princeton. He was the chief petrologist for GSI, and he also happened to be the son-in-law of
Son-in-law of the site.
Yeah, who knows?
Krishnan.
Yeah, Krishnan, MS Krishnan. I'm telling you stories, I don't know. You came here to learn about the usage and I'm telling you stories. But I think it's important that you learn the history of how things happen. Yes, sir. Dr. Raymond, you'll pardon me. Dr. Kale, you'll pardon me. But this is important history that as students of geology, you should know. Alright? So I was rejected. I didn't know why I was rejected. I said, I'm a rank holder. First rank in high school, first rank in college, first rank in BSc Honours, top rank in MSc. And I was rejected for a 275 rupee job with GSI. I went all the way to Calcutta for an interview. And I was rejected. Later on, I found out the person who was the chief of petrology at that time was the gentleman who worked on Sittampundi in Princeton University. And he was just getting ready to publish his thesis in the Geological Society of America Bulletin. And he was the one who interviewed me, and he said he had a grudge against Naidu.
Oh.
He did not like Naidu because he set up his students to oppose his work. And he did not agree with Naidu's views, and Naidu did not agree with the other guy's views. And so these two guys were fighting with each other, and who suffers?
You.
Students.
And who gains? Same student. One student of Naidu gets the job, the other student of Naidu does not get the job. Well, anyway, that is history. And you should know, things like this are common not only in this country, but everywhere else. The world is the same. As a matter of fact, when somebody asked me at one of the, I used to come to India quite often. And whenever I came, some university is always there, say, do you want to give a lecture to our students? I used to give lecture to the students. And in one of the lectures, somebody asked me, sir, is there a big difference between students in America and students in India? I thought about it for a minute and I said, no. No was my answer. Oh, what do you mean? So, no, sir. When no American students are supposed to be great, Indian students are good. I said, baloney. Baloney is the American term saying that bullshit. Bullshit or baloney is all nonsense is the normal term that should be used, but then they use the other terms. I said, no, there's no difference. I'll tell you the reason. Students are students everywhere. They want to do less work and get better marks. Same thing here, same thing there. All right? But there, they are doing the work because they are interested in doing the work. Here, they are doing the work because they are told they have to do the work. See, here the syllabus is set. There is no syllabus there. You have to decide, this is the specialty I want, and then the professor will tell you, in order for you to specialize this, you have to do 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 that. So the professor will dictate what courses you have to take. If you tell him this is a subject that I want you to do specialization in. Anyway, to come back to our story, the universal stage. Okay, we are digressing too much. Okay, basically what we want to learn is how is it constructed and what kind of manipulations we make with the universal stage in order to get the information we want. All right. Now, I showed you that there were many directions in which the universal stage can rotate. I showed you we can rotate it this way, we can rotate it this way, and we can rotate inside this, and we can rotate the whole thing also. So, there's 1, there's 2, there's 3, and there's 4. These are the 4 axes of rotation of the universal stage. And then there's a 5th one. I don't want to talk about it, but you should know that there is a 5th one. And why did they create the 5th one? I'll come to talk to you about it later on, With the 4 rotations of what we're trying to do is to bring the XYZ, the optical directions XYZ, in certain orientation where we know exactly where the X is, where the Y is, where the Z is. That's the whole idea. We want to rotate the thin section in such a fashion that we take the XYZ of the mineral, bring it into positions where we can test it. How do we know it's X? How do we know it's a Y? Or how do we know it's a Z? Now, I'm sure those of you who studied and teach optical mineralogy, X is a fast direction, Z is a slow direction, and Y is an intermediate direction. I mean, in terms of speed of propagation of light. X is the fastest one, Z is the slowest one, Y is the intermediate one. All right? Generally, and 90% of the time, 95% of the time, X and Z lie in one plane. X and Z lie in one plane, and the Y is perpendicular to it. We generally call this the XZ plane, and the Y is perpendicular to that plane. All right? So, once you understand this relationship, XZ, Y, how are the X, Z, and Y related to ABC? Now, I have to tell you the fact. ABC are determined on the basis of morphology, crystallography. Whereas optical mineralogists are not so much interested. No, they should be, but originally they were not. They were more interested in the XYZ. But then came the idea they have to be related to the ABC, and that's how the two got married later on. But in the beginning stages, optical mineralogy was XYZ. That's what we want to know. Is it uniaxial or biaxial? Is it positive or negative? Is it, this is what it is. Is that a principal section or is it a whatever? So, to make a long story short, basically, you have to orient the mineral in such a fashion where you know where the X is, where the Y is, and where the Z is. Now, let me show you something that is not normally shown everywhere. These two are boxes that contain models. Here's a model of a uniaxial mineral. You can all see it from a distance. All right. So you can see that the black one going up and down is the C-axis. All right. And that's also the optic axis. Now the optic axis may be positive, may be negative, may be this way, maybe the other way, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. But basically they made one model. By the way, I bought this from Lights Company. This was back in 1972, 73, when I was working in New York, in the university. I luckily became the chairman, so I could spend the money. See, if I was not the chairman, I have to make a request to sir, I want to buy some equipment, can you enroll me, sir? The budget is too tight this semester. Maybe next semester we should try. I was the chairman, so I had the authority to buy these things. So I bought this. This is one. And more interesting than this, is the other one. Now you can see this is a little bit more complicated than the other one. And this is the biaxial indicatrix. Talking in optical mineralogy terms, this is the biaxial indicatrix. That's the technical term. I am sure all of you understand. If you don't understand, please ask me or go back and refer to your books. Sometimes you feel that, oh, I can't ask questions. People might think that I don't know anything, so I don't want to ask questions. This happens. See, I've been a college professor for more than 40, 45 years, and so I know the mentality of students, and I was a student myself at one time. Talking about students and their attitudes, we used to be afraid of talking to our professor. Here in Naidu was so strict. He would walk like this. We could hear his tapping on the ground when he was walking into the department. And nobody would dare to go and ask him anything in the morning. He would come around 10 o'clock and sit in his office. And we will wait to ask him questions later on. The best time to ask him a question is in the afternoon. And when was the afternoon? We used to have tea in the department. We were research scholars, maybe 5 or 6 of us, and every afternoon we used to have tea and biscuits. And this was be around 3 or 3:30 or 4 o'clock. That's the evening time. The department used to work until 5:30, 6 o'clock now, but 3:30, 4 o'clock is the tea time. And five or six of us, we used to take turns in making tea. We all had to learn how to make tea. And the way the professor likes it, so it has to be according to his taste, we make the tea. So we make the tea, and some research assistant who is a chief guy, who has direct access to the professor. We all don't have direct access to the professor, unless he says, yes, come in. So he would go and invite the professor, said, tea is ready. Okay. So he would come, sit there, have his half a cup of tea, and then we can ask him questions, because he's in a good mood. Yeah, it's very important that he's in a good mood so we can ask him questions. But anyway, coming back to our subject, the biaxial indicatrix. And the reason why I was talking about our professors and when to talk to him is because I said, if you have a question, ask me. Don't feel bad. In America, the students raise their hand anytime they want and ask you any kind of question. And sometimes I have to tell them, this is not the right kind of question for this time. Ask me some other time. Let me continue. And then go on. This happens all the time. Anyway, biaxial indicatrix, and what are the items in a biaxial indicatrix? Starting with X, the fast ray, the Y, the intermediate ray, the Z, the slow ray. And then there's the optic axis. Optic axis, the plural. There are two of them, and they're there. The two black ones are the optic axis, and we have the red one, the yellow one, and green one. I can't see too well in the slide, but there's a green, there's a red, and there's a yellow. Yellow is the intermediate axis, and the X and Z are the green and the red. Okay. Now this is an indicatrix model with all the items: fast ray, intermediate ray, slow ray, two optic axes, and then there is the bisectrix. Bisectrix is nothing but the axis that goes through in between the two axes is known as the bisectrix, and it could be an acute bisectrix, like in this case it is an acute bisectrix, and if we change the model to the other type, which we don't have, we can have the obtuse bisectrix. Okay. So in the acute bisectrix, which is the easy one to understand, we can say by looking at this model that this one is positive. How do we know it's positive? That's the way they decided it's going to be. Somebody said, if the acute bisectrix is Z, then it's got to be positive. That's it. What he said became the law. God did not tell anybody. Somebody created a law and then everybody agreed to follow. And that's how all these things happen in life. You're recording all my proceedings, including the other kinds of information I'm giving you, right? Okay. So, the acute bisectrix is Z, therefore it is positive. Because somebody stated it is positive, and everybody agreed it's positive. It's the same thing like, for example, in uniaxial minerals. Where is the uniaxial thing? It was somewhere. In the uniaxial minerals, you know which one is positive, which one is negative. If the extraordinary ray is fast, it's negative. If the extraordinary ray is slow, it's positive. So, what we want to know in this is the extraordinary ray positive or slow or negative? What is the thing that we can? So what we need to do is to get the extraordinary ray and then test it. Get the extraordinary ray to lie parallel, put in a microscope the accessory, either a gypsum plate or a quartz wedge or whatever it is, to see whether it's a fast ray or a slow ray. I'm sure you know the theory behind. You can always tell it's a fast ray or a slow ray by introducing an accessory quartz wedge. or no, gypsum plate. I like the gypsum plate better because it's only one order of magnitude going up or down, and you can tell the difference. From red is going to yellow or whatever the other color is. Okay. Now, I don't like to use quartz rate because too many colors going too fast. And then when you go this way, it goes and all the colors are going too fast into gypsum plate. I like. That's the one. Okay, so same way, in a biaxial mineral, we do the same thing. We try to bring the acute bisectrix, or actually the other bisectrix, to say, test each one of them on the basis of determination of whether it's a fast or slow. We can determine optically positive, optically negative. As far as the 2V is concerned, which has been mentioned many, many times in this lecture already, 2V is the emergence of the two optic axes. How do we know what the emergence of the optic axis is? When we turn this in a position where this black one, which is the optic axis, which is coming straight up and down, then you know in ordinary microscope work, if you bring one of the optic axis straight up and down, coincide with the microscope axis, then the mineral will be totally dark. A mineral can be totally dark on two occasions. One, it's an isotropic mineral. No matter what you do, it's going to be dark. That's isotropic. If on the other hand, as you turn it, it shows light. But in one position, with the entire section being black on a 360-degree rotation, then we're dealing with a mineral where the optic axis is going straight up and down. This is the normal knowledge that you acquire and teach for optical mineralogy classes without the use stage. How can you tell? You know how to turn an interference figure in a regular microscope? Yes, it's quite easy. You find the proper grain. That's the most important thing. You can get an interference figure on any grain you want. It has to be appropriate. How do you know it's appropriate? My professor taught me how to find a grain that is appropriate. And I teach my students the same technique. How? Depend upon the particular mineral. Most of the time, I want to find a mineral piece that is showing low birefringence. I don't want any piece that is showing high birefringence. Low birefringence and very little change in the birefringence as I rotate the stage. These are the kinds of characteristics that are good to find the right position to find an interference figure. Dr. Krishnamurti was telling me that in his early days he was trying to figure out the optic axial angle for olivines. Is it positive or negative? All right. First of all, let me tell you, and I'm sure he knows it, to find the optic axial angle in olivines, most olivines have a very large 2V. When you have a large 2V, it's very difficult to get a good interference figure. They come and go, just like a little song and dance, they come and go, and you have to have good imagination with three-dimensional figuration of the interference figures to know exactly whether it's smaller angle or larger angle. Small angle, there's no problem. Oh yeah, put a muscovite under the microscope, you get a beautiful interference figure with all the isogires, and you can put in gypsum plate. Actually, at that time, you put in a quartz rate because gypsum plate doesn't do enough justice to change the color for a mica when you put it under the microscope. As a matter of fact, when I teach undergraduate optical mineralogy, when I introduce them to interference figures, I have a lot of pieces of muscovite mica lying around, and put it under the stage and then turn on the Bertrand lens and then turn on this and turn on the, oh, beautiful, beautiful. They love that. When they see that figure, they think that it's so great. Optical mineralogy is wonderful. That's how we get them to get interested in optical mineralogy. See, if we start with them, all the theory and all, they don't care. So bring in the class and show them some interference figures to start with, and get like, oh, beautiful. And then you slowly start teaching them anything else. Anyway, coming back to this, it's important to understand that even with the universal stage, now I'm coming to the items that even a universal stage cannot do that easily. There are things. Universal stage is not the ideal for every mineral every time. No. The answer is definitely no. But we don't want to say it out loud. We want to keep that the low key, because we are now talking about the importance of universal stage, not the other thing. But it's important to tell you what it cannot do. It cannot. For example, depending upon the orientation of the particular piece you have, you may not be able to turn it to the position, because there are limits on which you can turn, particularly this axis. If you turn any more than about 45, 50, 60 is the upper limit. You cannot go any further than 60 degrees of tilt, and then you lost it, more or less. When I say you lost it, doesn't mean it's going to fall and walk away. In American terminology, lost means that you cannot do anything with it. That's the meaning in which I use the word lost. You cannot do anything with it. That's the uppermost. Same thing with the other axis. Any tilt more than about 45, 50 max, you cannot really do anything with it. So there are limitations. The limitations are about 45, 50 degrees of tilt on any axis, with the exception of the K-axis. This is what called the K-axis. It's called K because it's a control axis. You're controlling everything, and you can tilt it. But then even here, anything more than about 50 or 55 degrees, your thin section is sitting almost vertical and you can't see a thing. So, there is. We'll stop here for a minute and then try to summarize what I have said. Okay? It's important to stop from time to time, not only to talk about other subjects, it's important to summarize things. We talked about the universal stage. The principal thing that a universal stage can do is to take a horizontal flat piece of mineral and tilt it in such a direction where we can see the emergence of any optical direction. Either it's going up and down, or it's going sideways, or any which way. We can tell what it is by testing it. So this is the main thing. We can take a horizontal thin section of mineral and get the particular X, Y, or Z into positions where we can test it and we know exactly where it is. And then we make a note of the angles. All right. We make a note of the angle of the X. We make a note of the angle of the Z or the Y. We can, by the way, determine only two, not all three. Of the X, Y, Z, we generally determine two of them. Within the limits of these tilts, we can do two of the three, and then we have to resort to plotting. We have to plot them. All right. We take these readings and then plot them into this, and then we can start turning things one way or the other in terms of making adjustments, in terms of where is the other axis located, and then we can do other things with this. I'll show you how to get these things, but basically we take the numbers from the machine and then we transfer them onto this wolf net. And then from the wolf net, we start making measurements. Now, when we do all these things, there are a number of things that we have to be aware of. Number one, the refractive index of the mineral itself. That's important. Not all minerals have the same refractive index. And number two, within this universal stage, The mineral section is mounted horizontal here, and the mineral section itself is embedded in Canada balsam. Canada balsam has a fixed refractive index, all right, which is not quite the same as the refractive index of the mineral itself. So we have variations. Start talking about the refractive index of the mineral, start talking about Canada balsam, which is sitting around it, and then in order to mount this whole thing, we have what we call the hemispheres. There are two hemispheres. There's one that goes on top. There's another one that goes at the bottom. All right. This is what's going into the universal stage. Here's the universal stage. And by the way, there is a glass plate. Are we running out of time?
No.
Because we gave him 1 hour. You gave him only half hour.
No, sir. We are not okay.
No, tell me when, and we can continue later on.
It's all yours, sir. Yeah, it's all yours.
I'll just take a couple of more minutes and wrap up.
No.
Okay.
Just go.
Now, here is a thin section, and there's a glass plate. You can't just put the thin section, it will fall all the way through. So we put the thin section on top of the glass plate. We put the glass plate, and then on top of it the thin section, and then on top of it the hemisphere. So there's different layers. There's a glass plate, there's a thin section, and then there is the upper hemisphere. And then underneath the glass plate is the lower hemisphere, which is this. Now, all these things have to stick together. Now you can't put glue, particularly crazy glue, you cannot do it. You have to use some other medium. Glycerine, and I hope we have glycerine in this lab, I'm sure. Every lab that has a university has to have glycerine. So we put 1 drop of glycerine to make all these things hold together. All right? We have 2 screws that hold the top hemisphere, and as far as the bottom hemisphere is concerned, magic. There is nothing to hold it except glycerine. Glycerine is the only one that will hold the lower hemisphere by itself. There is no other screw for the lower hemisphere. So all these things are held together by various means, plus glycerine. But remember, the mineral is of 1 refractive index. The glass, actually the Canada balsam sitting around is a different refractive index. The glass itself is a different refractive index. And the top hemisphere is of a different refractive index. And then hopefully the bottom refractive index of the hemisphere is the same as the top. So we have at least 1, 2, 3. 3 different refractive indices all put together, and we're looking through all this. God save us. Because it's not easy. We got umpteen layers of different refractive indices, materials, and we're trying to do things and measure things. And thank God, Prof has already figured out all these things. Figured out means has finished learning how to take care of all these things. That's what I mean by, in American language, we say figured out. That means he somehow calculated and then did things, figured out. So from now on, if I use the word figured out, you understand what I mean, right? I'm sure most of you understand American English by now, because America has become a part of India. And India has become a part of America. And as a matter of fact, I've been in that country for more than 60 plus years. 60 plus. I left India in 1957. Most of you were not even born. And as a matter of fact, I tell my students, you are not even thought of, never mind being born. Your father did not meet your mother yet. And I went to America. Anyway, so I got used to it. It took me a while to learn the local language and the way they speak it, they use the idioms and all that. It took me a little bit of time. And then even there, we have different types of English used in different parts of the United States. In New York, you have one kind of English. It's American English. It's one kind. You go to Texas, you get a different kind of English. They use it as a, different way of saying it. Right? You go south, that's a different kind of English. You go to different parts of the United States and you hear American English with a different pronunciation. There's differences. But here, we go to a state and we get totally a different language. Totally different language, different script, different everything. There at least is the same language but a slight intonation. Here it's impossible. You go 200 miles to a different state, you go to Kannada and Kannada. Gottilla. you go to Tamil Nadu, teriyade, po. You come to Telugu, See, all these different languages. And then I worked with Bengalis, right? They have a different language altogether. They get up in the morning and say, Acto chai dosha rasgulla for breakfast. We eat rasgulla for breakfast, which is nice. I mean, I like rasgulla, except I became a diabetic, so I don't eat rasgulla anymore. But before I became a diabetic, I used to like rasgulla, but not. Well, anyway, coming back to what we were talking about, we have different layers of different minerals, different refractive indices, and all these kinds of differences. So they worked on it, and then they developed curves to make corrections. When we go from one mineral of refractive index to another material of a different refractive index, the ray of light does not travel continuously. If the refractive index is the same, the ray will travel this way. But if the refractive index is different, it may turn one way or it may turn the other way depending upon whether it's higher or lower. So we have to make a correction. So they developed corrections. So we make a correction. And then we come to the top. How many more refractive indices, hemispheres can we make to match the mineral inside? So they decided we'll make maybe 3 different refractive index hemispheres, 1.517, 1.548, and 1.61 something. So most companies made 3 different kinds of refractive indices, hemispheres. The top and the bottom are the same 517, 517, or 648 or 648, something like that. And you choose the hemispheres which are as close as possible to the refractive index of the mineral itself that you are working with. Now you don't put a 517 and work with pyroxenes. Now pyroxenes have a higher refractive index, so you use a higher refractive index like 548 or 617 or whatever it is, if it is available. All right? Even there, it's not exactly the same thing, so we have to make some more corrections. So we make corrections. There's too many corrections sometimes. You have to understand. These corrections are being made because the refractive index of the different kinds of materials that are surrounding the mineral piece itself are different. If they are all the same, then we don't have to make any correction. Perfect. We make everything with the same refractive index and then we can use everything. But life is not that simple and we don't have enough money to make different kinds of refractive index hemispheres. So we live with what we have and we try to do things with whatever corrections we can get from people who worked with it and made the corrections. By the way, all these things are written up in the original book of Professor Naidu. Now I have to show you what the original book looks like. This is the original book, and there's not that many copies of it. And no matter who I talk to, they say, yeah, we used to have one, but then we can't find it. And that is true of me too. I had a copy, but my students, they're always very nice. Professor, did you get a part of that page? I have written it tomorrow morning. That tomorrow morning never comes. You don't even know where the student is. That tomorrow morning never comes and you never know it. So the book went with him. There is a Sanskrit saying, and I'm sure you will understand. We can say, this guy who has been away from India for 65 years and is still knowing Sanskrit sayings. So yes, I still can recite Telugu poems. I still know a few Sanskrit poems. I can do that. And I'm very proud to say that. In spite of the fact that I've been away, I can still do that. I can speak my language very well. I can write well. I can read poetry in that. And I can do all that. But anyway, coming back to the saying, Pustakam vanita vittam parahastam gatangataha. Pustakam vanita vittam parahastam gatangataha. Pustakam. You know what a pustakam is, a book. Vanita. Vanita is a young girl. Very young, unmarried, beautiful looking girls like you. Pustakam vanita vittam. Vittam is money. Pustakam vanita vittam. These three items. Parahastam gatangataha means if they change hands, they go from your hand to somebody else's hand. Pustakam vanita vittam gatangataha. That means it's gone for good. So, Pustakam, when it changes hands, it will never come back. But then there is a second part to this point. Let me finish that. Alright. Pustakam vanita vittam parahastam gatangataha adhava punarayacha. That means if it comes back, jirnancha bhrashtancha khandasaha. When it comes back in the order, Pustakam vanita vittam. Remember, book, girl, and money. Pustakam jirnancha. That means it doesn't come in the same shape as it was given to you. It's already folded, broken or a piece of torn, things like that. Next one is Vanita. Bhrashtancha. Please translate. Spoiled. This is spoiled. You can interpret the spoiling in any fashion you want, but I won't go into it. So, Vanita Bhrashtancha Vittam Khandasaha. That means you'll never come back everything. It'll come back only in pieces. And if it comes in pieces, that's all you're going to get. So, Pustakam vanita vittam parahastam gatangataha adhava punarayacha jirnancha bhrashtancha khandasaha. So, remember this Sanskrit poem. I didn't invent it. Somebody who wrote it a long time ago. And I learned it and I still apply it. And I tell my friends, and this is the fact. Okay? So, anyway, to come back to our subject. Now, how did we do that? Oh yeah, I was starting about the book. This book, even my book was, loaned. We call it permanently loaned. That means you'll never come back. So, somebody loaned it, never came back. A friend of mine, who was my classmate, he bought the same book at the same time I bought it too. And he died. And his collection of books was just thrown there and said, take anybody who wanted. So I look at this book, I want it. Even if it is a second copy, I still want it. Of course, I lost my first copy, I didn't tell anybody. So I got the second copy from my friend, who is no more. A fellow by name Martin Prince. Some of you might recall, he was my classmate in PhD, and we grew up together in America. And he was unmarried at that time, and I was also not unmarried. Well, that doesn't matter anything. Anyway, we were friends, and later on, there were stories I can relate about him and me, but he is no more. But I still have the book with his name on it, and I still tell everybody, this is the only book available I have, and maybe in some libraries, some book might exist, God knows where. So I decided I want to write a second edition to the book, and that's what prompted me to do this. And I told everybody this morning, 1975, somebody from the Mineralogical Society requested me to redo the book, which I did, and then they didn't do anything with it. And then later on, after I retired, I said, what is happening with this book? And I talked to people. They said, this is useless. And that's been my story. Everything gets rejected. I got rejected for a 275 rupee job in Calcutta, and I got rejected for the Indian book, and even the Geological Society of India, and they said, no, we don't want that book. Dr. Krishnamurti already told that to everybody. Anyway, now I'm so happy. You don't know how happy I am to be here. I'm so thankful to all these people who have made it a point to make my dream come true. My dream was to publish this book. I mean, this is not the only book I've written. I've written other books, but this is the book that I wanted to. My professor, out of respect to him, and out of a request that was made by the society's, chief in 1974. I wrote everything, but then he didn't do anything. So anyway, now I revised it. Now it's come true, and I want to thank everybody. So to make a long story short, let me finish this part, and I think it'll be just in time.
Yes.
12:30. What time are we supposed to finish?
When the lunch comes, sir.
Let me see. 1 o'clock.
When the lunch comes, sir. No problem.
Oh, we have another half an hour.
Yes, sir.
No, wait a minute. 11:30 to 1. I have half an hour more.
Yes.
Could I finish now? And
Yeah, sir.
Yeah.
If you want, you can sit. That's what he was telling you.
Yeah.
No, I mean we can continue.
No,
if you want to sit
and then.
No,
We'll leave it to you.
I never sit and teach. When I teach or when I'm in any meetings or anything like that, if I have to open my mouth, I have to be on my feet. I cannot be on my butt and speak.
Yes.
No butt, no speak. Only legs and speak.
Yes.
Anyway, so the basic item in summary is you are trying to rotate the mineral such that you are able to figure out where the X, Y, and Z are. And because there are different refractive indices in the entire system of this universal stage, you have to make the corrections. And there are graphs given in the books. It's there in the original book, it's also there in the new book. By the way, you will all get a copy of the
Certainly they
book
will.
after it's
They will.
redone. Right now it's in a what shall we say,
In a 95% stage.
95% stage, and we'll finish the 5%, I don't know, in some time span, and then Dr. Krishnamurti and Dr. Raymond, and of course with the blessing of our Vice Chancellor, who is also a lucky thing for us geologists. So he is really pushing it, and with all the push that we're getting here, that book will be done quite soon, and you'll get it. So in that you'll find all the information, the corrections and everything. Now, the other thing is that I was mentioning, we have to use the net in order to make the manipulations. By the way, this is my old net, and this was the one that was used by my students way back in the 70s. I was very much up with all this subject. As a matter of fact, after that I forgot about all this. When I found out that there is interest in India, particularly Dr. Krishnamurti and Dr. Raymond and all that, I started to study again, to learn all the things that I learned 60 or 70 years ago, to come back to my memory. Right now, if I'm saying things, they're all coming back to my memory after 60 years. Honestly speaking, I did not spend enough time to go back and read everything, to learn everything, to teach you or talk to you rather. But when I start talking, the subject matter just comes right through. I tell my classes, I sometimes teach a class of 120 students in a gallery, and here I am teaching. And I can see students talking to each other, and I can see students doing this. I see all kinds of activity going on in the class while I'm teaching. And this is something that any teacher who is serious teaching a class, they see any other activity, they don't like it. They don't like it. And I'm no exception. I don't like it either. So I tell them, look, My brain has the information, my mouth gets the information and says so, all right? My eyes are not connected with my brain or my mouth, they are functioning together, but my eyes can wander. I can see what's going on in the class. And I can hear what's going on in the class. I don't have to hear my own lecture. I hear it 1,000 times. I teach this blackboard, which knows the subject a lot better than any one of you here. This blackboard has listened to my lecture 100 times already. So I don't. Anyway, so I tell them, if you are doing anything else except listening to me, I can figure out because my eyes are doing it every day. So I slowly continue lecturing and walk up to the students who are talking to each other and just stand there and continue lecturing because my brain is feeding my mouth and my mouth is saying the right thing, but my eyes are somewhere else and my legs are independent. They can walk, they can sit. And after a while, they realize something is next to us here. And they look at me and I suddenly stop and stare at them and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, Professor. We won't do it again." They know what they did. They were talking to each other. Anyway, look, coming back to our subject matter, I keep going away from my subject matter all the time. Please tell me, stay on the subject.
It is refreshing anyway.
Anyway, look, all these graphs and everything are there in the books, so you can use them when you get the books. But what we will do this afternoon, and maybe tomorrow to some extent, is to try to show you where you can apply the corrections. First thing, you have to learn how to operate the stage. That will be the first sort of thing. After you learn how to operate the stage, how to make the readings and how to plot them and how to manipulate. This is the second step. The two steps: how to operate the stage. Second step, how to plot and then learn things. This is 2 stages, but the first part will take a certain amount of, it's not just know-how. Know-how is easy. When I tell you, it sounds like, yes, we understand. But when you start doing it, it's like, how do you drive a car? It's very easy. Just start the engine, put it in gear, and press the accelerator, it'll go. Yeah, you try doing that. You wouldn't make any advance. The same thing. It's very easy. You put it in section and you just tell it to it's easy to say it, but you try doing that. And I want you to actually do it. And I hope we have universal stages that they can work with, at least 2 or 3 of them which can join, friends of join and then work together and things like that. And then the same thing with the plotting and doing things. And then Professor Subramaniam is here to tell us how to do things with the
impacted material.
Yeah, right. He's an expert on doing whatever, meteorites and stuff like that. By the way, I also worked on meteorites for nearly about 20 years of my life on meteorites. I worked on every kind of meteorite. Anyway, so these charts, I think we have enough to give them later on. Not now. Later on, we will all get charts we can use. And I'll show you how to do that. And all this is what's coming up this afternoon. So, but most important thing is how to mount the stage. You don't just take the stage and then just put it there and say, ready to go. No. You have to center the stage. The stage has to be centered with respect to the microscope. Now, before doing all this, you have a microscope and you have objectives. By the way, the only objective that you can use with the research microscope, by the way, it has to be a research microscope because the distance between the objective and the actual stage has to be a certain minimal distance in order to accommodate all this. Now, once you put this on the stage, you can't just start tightening things and then rotating things. Everything has to be centered up and down. And for that, first you have to center the objective you have on the stage, which has to be a low power objective, because high power objectives will not be able to focus with the hemisphere. You got all these things sitting on top of each other. By the time you put any kind of an objective, it'll hit the top. So any kind of objective other than the low power. They will not work. So what they did was, this is just a digression here, they have manufactured other objectives which are made in such a fashion that they will be able to focus even with all this equipment there. You call these the UT objectives, and they have low power, medium power, things like that. But then there are additional things that you have to buy when you have the equipment. So I thought I'll show you one or two of them that I brought from my lab in the United States. And these things are important. You can't always work with only low power. You have to have some medium power. So sometimes you have basalts which are very small, grain size and all that kind of stuff. So you need that. Anyway, coming back to this, you have to center the stage to the microscope. First order business, you center the stage with respect to the low power objective you have. That's the beginning. And I hope all of you know how to center a stage, microscope stage. 2 screws and all that kind of stuff, I don't want to go into the details of it. Once you do that, then you put this stage on, and then you tighten up everything else at 0. Everything has to be at 0 or 360, and tighten everything else, and then put the slide on top of the glass plate and let it sit. And then see, when you rotate the microscope stage, the mineral grain should not wander. And that's the test for centering. When you put the microscope, when you put the stage, the slide on the microscope stage and then rotate it, the mineral grain should not wander. If it wanders, then you make the adjustments with the 2 screws and then bring it to center, and then you have to do the same thing with the stage on. With all the 0 positions, with the stage on, you have to center everything. And in the original microscopes, in the original U stages that the lights manufactured, this was what they gave us. And you had to put 2 screws here to lock them up to the microscope stage. And once you lock them, then everything is all set. But before you lock it, then you center it, and you tighten it, and then center it and tighten it, center and tighten it. And finally, when you have it, then you're done. In the new microscopes, after about 10 years or so, or 20 years, the lights company said, oh, we want to create something else which will make it centering is easier. I don't have that with this, but in one of the pictures, you'll have it from the other book that he's going to give you. You're going to get another book, I hope, this afternoon. Yeah, in that you can see it. And I have one of it in New York, which I didn't bring. So that makes the centering a lot easier. You can put it in, and then there are 2 screws on either side. You can tighten, and then center it. That's easier. So whatever the case may be, the most important thing is to center this stage. Center the microscope stage, centering the U stage, and then you are ready to work. Okay? And then you have to center the other objectives also after you put in the U stage, then, because the other ones will not work with it. So you center everything before you start your work. The objectives, the stage, and everything. And then you're ready to work. And then comes the manipulation and how to do that. For that, I would like to take a few minutes. We have time. Now that I found out I have time till 1 o'clock. Okay. Now, I don't know how many of you can see what I'm going to do from here. We'll just... Can you see the stage from wherever you are? If you want, you can come closer so I can show you better. Here's the other one. I'll start with a simple uniaxial. By the way, there are 2 screws that I need. just to make it easier for me to rotate things. Yeah, now we can rotate. We can do this, we can do this, and we can also do this. You can see all the rotations we can make. What we do is we rest it at 0 degrees on the microscope, so this will not move. So we can do this rotation, or we can do this tilt, all right, or we can do this. Only 3 things are needed. Although it's a 4-axis, the 4th axis will be used later on, but for now we can do this, or we can do this, or we can do this.
Which is the 5th axis and the 5 axis?
No, this is a 4-axis.
No.
The 5th axis, in very simple terms, the 5th axis is used to get rid of this. They don't want to use this. So all these manipulations are done on the 5th axis itself, and that becomes cumbersome. This is easier to deal with, and of course, the accuracy of it is not any different from that to this. I did not specialize in 5-axis, but I know from practice that the accuracy with which that can do things and this can do things is almost the same. There's nothing more to gain except you have one more complexity to add it, and then you have to deal with, instead of 3 readings, you have 4 readings. And then you have to keep track of all the 4 readings and then go to decide what you want to do. But in here, we have only 3 readings to do, and then the 4th one is just a 45-degree rotation on the main stage. And then all the other aspects of it are done on this wolf net. But there are problems with the wolf net also. I mean, see, no matter what you do, there are always problems. So we just have to try to avoid as many problems as best as we can, and then just get along with life. So basically what I'm going to show you is, if we put this, let's say random, this is a random mineral, and I put it in any which way, any of you can help me put it in any way you like, and then I can show you how to manipulate. What we do is, we try to bring this particular mineral, see, this is the Indicatrix model of the mineral piece. Although you're seeing it in 3 dimensions, what we now have is just a slight 0.03 millimeters piece sitting there. And this Indicatrix model is embedded into the mineral, and we're expanding it so you can see visually what's happening. So we just put it any which way we like. Now, we want to bring some axis in some direction that we can recognize. All right? The easy way is to keep tilting it and rotating it in such a fashion that okay. Now we have the optic axis almost parallel to this axis. So if we try to rotate it this way, there should be total darkness. There should be no light, right? Because we're looking down here through this axis. That's the idea. The idea is to bring one of the optic axes into some direction that we can recognize. Now, what is the direction you can do? You can take it to 45-degree position and put in a gypsum plate and see whether this is fast or slow, and then you got the optics. Okay. Now, this is better illustrated with a biaxial mineral, a lot better than the uniaxial. Now we'll put in a biaxial mineral. This is the way the mineral is sitting. By the way, I didn't put it in any particular fashion. Any of you can put it in. You want to put it in, you put it in any position. It's not like I'm doing any magic. I'm just trying to show you what to do. Okay, you put it in. Now, if we try to rotate the mineral this way, you can see light changing and everything. We can rotate the mineral this way, you can see the lights changing any which way. We can rotate this mineral this way, the lights, all the colors will be changing all the time. Now, what we try to do is to rotate this and also tilt it. Tilting and rotation in a calculated manner, not at random. In the beginning you can do kind of at random. After you get used to playing with the material here, you have a feel for it. The idea is to bring one of the X, Y, Z in alignment with this or this, some kind of alignment. So let me see what we can bring. I think I can bring the green. Okay. No, that's too much. See, you're going for more than 45 degrees. Wait. Let me show you.